The day they drove me here, they told me it was for my own good, but all I heard was, goodbye. My name is Beulah Ellis, 74. In the morning, they said that line. The town wore autumn like a shawl. Gold lights slid down the storefronts and across the hood of Daniel's SUV. Maple leaves turned lazy circles before settling on the windshield, as if the season itself wanted to stall for me. The air smelled like wood smoke and damp apples, the kind of smell that makes your hands remember harvests. Daniel kept his eyes on the road and repeated that it was safer this way. He has always been the practical one, crisp shirts, firm plans, the kind of man who believes a checklist can steady a heart. He spoke in that careful voice people use, with a skittish horse. Laura sat in the back, tapping through emails, lips tight, with a meeting she would join as soon as she could find the Wi-Fi. She said the center had excellent reviews and that I would make friends. She added that my house had stairs and that stairs were statistics. Mark rode beside me in silence. He is the middle child twice over, always sliding between storms. When our eyes met in the mirror, he looked away and said, "We should focus on the positives." Maple Grove appeared at the end of a long drive lined with blazing maples. The brick glowed like a cooling ember. A fountain whispered in the courtyard, and the water held a scatter of leaves like small boats headed nowhere. Inside, the floor was clean, and the shine smelled faintly of lemons. A television murmured the morning news in a voice set to low comfort. A cart rolled by with oatmeal and cinnamon, and I felt hunger and grief bump shoulders inside me. Daniel told the receptionist that we had an appointment. He added that he had handled the paperwork because I get overwhelmed. Laura glanced at her watch and said, "We needed to be efficient." I nodded as if I agreed. In my head, another scene unspooled: the kitchen 30 years earlier, when my hands were quicker and the table was loud. The roast clicked in the oven, the radio played soft Motown, and the boys used their forks like drumsticks until their father cleared his throat with fake thunder. We blessed the food without looking at the clock. Laura bragged about a spelling bee ribbon, and Mark tried to trade green beans for rolls. Daniel calculated slices to make sure no one was cheated far down to the crumb. That dining room was small, and everything fit. The laughter, the tired feet, the stories about scraped knees. The promises we tossed across the plates like little boats that always reached shore. I can still feel the heat that rose when I opened the oven and the joy of announcing that the pie had set in the admission office. The clock ticked louder than any church bell. The director smiled and explained activities, therapy, and a calendar, studied with cheerful nouns. I heard the words and also heard the slow zipper of something closing. Daniel said, "Mom loses track of time and repeats herself." He said it kindly, like a headline he wished were not true. He looked at me as if the right look could make him less right. Laura pressed forms toward me and said it would help if I signed today. She said we were being proactive. She said she would stop by after work, maybe later this week. Mark touched my elbow and said this was temporary, just until we sorted things out. He said my safety mattered. He sounded like he was reading from a card someone else had written. I asked if anyone had asked what I wanted. The director folded her hands and said, "Everyone wants the same thing: to feel secure." Daniel said I would thank them someday. We walked the corridor toward my room. Doors stood ajar like mouths about to speak. From one room came the clicks of knitting needles. From another, a cough that sounded like a branch breaking. My room was neat and waiting bed made, curtains open to a slice of blue. A vase held 3 sunflowers with their faces turned to the window. A new quilt sat folded like a promise that had not learned. How heavy promises can be. Daniel put the suitcase on the chair and reminded me where the call button was. He said the move would be smoother if I did not try to pack more things. He said the house needed to be cleared before the end of the month. Laura placed a framed family photo on the dresser and adjusted it twice. She said I would be close to town, which would simplify visits. She said the staff was trained, which is a sentence you say when you do not want to think about tenderness. Mark set my sweater over the chair and stared at the pattern on the quilt. He said he would take care of the garden and that my peonies would not miss a season. He said he would call tonight. I tried on my new life the way you try on a pair of shoes at the store, walking a slow circle to see where it rubs. I touched the wall with my fingertips. I listened to the soft cartwheels and the softer sighs that float in places where days line up. They hugged me like people who are late. Daniel's arms were brief and firm. Laura's held a phone and a promise. Mark's lingered and then let go. I watched them walk down the hall, 3 silhouettes that used to tug at my skirt and now tugged at their calendars. I sat on the bed and counted my breaths until the door clicked. I thought about the smell of Sunday gravy and the sound of fork, tines against heavy plates, and a vinyl record that always skipped on the same lyric. I thought about the way boys become men while you are rinsing dishes. A nurse helped me find the dining room for lunch. She had kind eyes and the weary grace of someone who keeps showing up. She told me the soup was chicken and that the rolls came warm. I smiled and thanked her and kept the rest inside. There are things you carry close because they are the only steady heat you have left. There are things you do not say until the room is ready to hear them. The day they drove me here, I heard goodbye and also heard the click of another door opening far away. Last week, a lawyer called with news from California. My sister kept a secret, and now it is mine and if I choose to use it. Everything about this place, and my place in it, will change. A week after I arrived at Maple Grove, the phone in my room rang with a voice from another life. The lawyer's tone was measured, but the words spilled like light through a crack. My sister in California had passed and left me $6.8 million. I sat very still, tracing the armrest with my thumb, and let the number settle in like a seed looking for soil. That afternoon, I asked the front desk for the public records terminal in the library. The computer was slow but steady. I searched property filings and corporate registrations for Maple Grove and its parent company. I wrote down names, addresses, and filing dates in a small spiral notebook I kept under a stack of crossword puzzles. I learned the chain owned 3 facilities in Oregon, each under the same holding company, each leveraged with loans that made them vulnerable. At night, I called the attorney back and asked what it would take to buy them quietly. We spoke about trusts, shell entities, and how to keep my name out of headlines until I was ready. His answers were precise, and I could almost hear him leaning closer when he realized I was not just a curious old woman, but a client with a plan. The days moved in their slow rhythm. Mrs. Powell, once a literature teacher, sat near the window with a stack of old essays she had saved. She would read aloud a paragraph and then stare into the air, as if the chalkboard might reappear if she waited long enough. Across the hall, Mr. Harland, a retired Navy sailor, told sea stories that smelled of salt and diesel. His hands shaped the air into waves, masts, and storms that never touched the land. I listened more than I spoke. I kept notes on the worn carpets, the flicker in the fluorescent lights, the chairs in the common room with stuffing tired enough to sigh. I noticed which aides worked past their shifts, and which ones vanished the moment the clock hit their hour. I counted how many residents had family visit more than once a month, and the tally was short. One Sunday, I stood at the edge of the courtyard and watched a family gather under a maple tree. A young boy chased leaves while his grandmother held his jacket like a tether. The parents poured coffee from a thermos and passed around muffins still warm. Their laughter carried across the grass, and something in me drew a straight line between that sound and the silence in my own room. That was the moment the plan set like concrete. Within a month, the trust had signed purchase agreements for Maple Grove and the 2 sister facilities. I walked the halls the next morning, knowing the floor beneath my feet was mine. In a way, no one here guessed. The first order I signed was for new lighting, carpet, and chairs built to last. The second was for a fresh coat of paint colors that looked like dawn instead of dusk. The kitchen received upgraded equipment and a budget for fresh produce from local farms. The activity room got a piano tuned for the first time in years. In the garden, I ordered benches placed under the trees and raised beds for vegetables. Then I wrote the new policy. Every resident would have the right to see their family at least once a week. Families who could not make that commitment would have visiting hours limited to the weekends. A rule meant not to punish, but to protect the time that mattered. I signed it with a pen that felt heavier than its weight. I kept my name off the memos and my face out of the staff meetings. The changes rolled out like quiet tides, lifting the place without anyone seeing the moon behind them. I walked the corridors at night, listening to softer laughter, smelling better coffee, feeling the hum of a place that was waking up. In the mirror, I looked the same, but under my skin there was a steadiness I had not felt since. The house was mine, and the children were small. I was no longer just a resident. I was the keeper of this space, and I was not done yet.